Hello and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine war update news segment for the 6th of February 2023. Let's get to where we always go to first, which is the Ukrainian releases for the Russian losses the day before. Usual caveats, propaganda accuracy. Russia don't produce the same sort of figures. This is indicative. 870 personnel liquidated yesterday, so that's again ticking upwards. 11 tanks, 10 APCs, 5 artillery systems, and 1 MLRS. That's higher than average, is at least how I see the average from just intuitively, looking over these figures and seeing what they've been on previous days and previous weeks and previous months. 870 is a high number, and 11 tanks is high. 10 APCs is fairly high. So, pretty bad day for the Russians, but not the worst. 13 vehicles and fuel tanks lost. So, yeah, make of that what you will. Talking about losses, here's a Russian claim. So Russian Telegram channels are claiming about destroyed Ukrainian Su-35, Su-25, but it's a Russian Su-25 SM RF 95152 15 blue. Be careful of what claims are thrown around. In this case, the Russians claiming that they've shot down a Ukrainian Su-25. It turns out it's a Russian Su-25. It's not the first time that's happened. I made a claim a couple of weeks back about some vehicles that were blown up, drone footage, but was it a bit of a tank battle or something? Anyway, the drone footage was it had a watermark of a Russian unit on, and someone pointed that out to me, and I did have to go and look up the sources, but the sources didn't get back to me about that piece of video footage. So in the end, I didn't correct myself, but this is me kind of partially correcting that. It was just one piece of footage I showed that actually could have been Russian footage of Ukrainian losses. It wasn't a tank battle; it was actual losses, I think. But there you go. So we do need to be careful all the time. A Washington-based company to build 8 patrol boats for Ukraine. The patrol boats can reach speeds of 40 knots and have a range in excess of 600 nautical miles. The problem with this, of course, be how to get them to Ukraine. These would have to be delivered over land, because I doubt you'd be able to get them through the Bosphorus Straits, because there's no military, no naval vessels can go through the Bosphorus Straits, because is the Montreux Convention, where the Turkish, who own the Bosphorus Straits, if you like, have shut that down to any military traffic. So the Russians are unable to get their naval vessels in, and I assume that would also mean naval vessels would be unable to get in for the Ukrainians, even if they are being delivered. So that would have to come through land. I have maintained that the Turkey upholding that convention is one of the most important aspects of this war, one of the most important reasons Ukraine have prevailed so far. If Russia were able to get their full navy into because their navy is half decent, if they'd be able to get their navy into the Black Sea, you would have a completely different situation. Okay, Ukraine won't use longer range rockets. This was asked on the live last 2 nights ago when I did a live with Andrew Perpetua. Go check that out. It's on my Atypical Philosopher channel. Ukraine won't use longer range rockets pledged by the US. So these are the GLSDB, ground launch small diameter bombs to hit Russian territory, and will only target Russian forces in the occupied territory of Ukraine, says Defense Minister Reznikov. Let's go and look at some tanks. Ongoing training in Ukrainian tankers for the Challenger 2. So this is in Salisbury Plain in the UK, only about half an hour, 40 minutes from where I live. That's them doing their Challenger training. Prime Minister of Portugal, Antonio Costa, has stated that the country will send Leopard 2 heavy tanks to Ukraine without specifying the numbers. This is because one of the Portuguese papers had maintained that he wasn't going to send them, that he walked that back due to the fact that they weren't up to spec and weren't really fully operational, or some such reason. He's now stated that they will be sent. Good news for Ukraine. Training of Ukrainian crews on Leopard tanks will begin tomorrow, so that's beginning today. Defense Minister Alexei Reznikov said, without specifying in which Western country it will take place. According to him, it is already quite clear from which country we should wait for Leopards. The first Canadian main battle tank Leopard 2, which we gave to Ukraine, has arrived in Poland, said the Canadian Minister of National Defence, Anita Anand. That's great. So we are starting to see these Leopard 2 tanks filter through into, well, this is Poland, which you therefore imagine it was shortly into Ukraine, unless these are going to be delivered for training in Poland, which is actually probably more likely. Not 100% sure. Uh, there are a number of tanks, different tanks coming from different nations. So it's not just about Leopard 2. There are Leopard 1s, Challenger 2s, the PT tanks of Soviet era from Poland, old T-72s and whatnots. Indeed, we're starting to see some of these tanks arriving from the Excalibur Army Company, which has been paid by US and Dutch sources to upgrade these Czech T-72s in the Czech Republic. And these have been suitably upgraded. The most important thing will be the optics, I think, from as far as I'm concerned, optics and thermal imaging inside. You need to be able to see your enemy first before they see you. You can see the ERA blocks on the side of this, so it does look like it's, I don't know, without more detail, it's hard to say, but it looks like it's pretty much up to spec, and you'd imagine it will be. So that's great to see those being put onto the battlefield, and the tankers will be able to drive these without a problem. Anyone with sort of tank training in Ukraine. Okay, moving on. Russia and Iran are moving ahead with plans to build a new factory in Russia that could make at least 6,000 Iranian-designed drones for the war in Ukraine, officials from a country aligned with the US says, and that's according to the Wall Street Journal. A high-level Iranian delegation flew to Russia in early January to visit the planned site for the factory. The two countries are aiming to build a faster drone that could pose new challenges to Ukrainian air defenses, the officials said. Now, this will be on the back of the fact that Russia are still receiving an awful lot of electronic kit, sanctioned stuff, or stuff that can be used for dual purpose. In other words, pieces of electronics that can be used in the commercial sector but can be co-opted to be used in the military materials sector. And Russia are still getting that a plentiful supply of that, it seems, through countries like China, Kazakhstan, Turkey, Armenia, close by countries, and countries that seem to be fine with flouting sanctions, or at least not adhering to sanctions. Okay, moving on to particular things to do with the front line. This is Igor Girkin talking, and he's really damning about what's going on. So Russia is currently wasting a lot of men in Bakhmut, Vuhledar, and elsewhere for nothing, and Strelkov is even admitting that Russians cannot achieve a breakthrough, and Ukrainians will soon receive far more Western heavy gear. Girkin went on a sad rant again yesterday about the poor state of the Russian communication, aviation, and supply. More so, believes that Russia is not ready for a major offensive, and if it's daft enough to try it, it can turn out worse than the Kiev de-escalation. So let's quickly look at some of the things he says. The general situation, you see it for yourself, but if you need a general situation, I evaluate in the same way I've written about it. That is, we got ourselves into another swamp, and we're standing in it again and again for God knows what. Just like in 2014, our leadership made steps to think it and didn't think it through. It expected a completely different result, and when the result turned out to be, to put it mildly, sad, they again froze and are now waiting. In autumn, measures were taken to avoid quick defeat, achieve parity with the enemy in people on the front at least, and practically when the parity emerged and the situation stabilized, they immediately put brakes on everything again, with the hope that it all would somehow sort itself out. And this is what our propaganda is actively promoting to the population. As if Ukraine is about to collapse at any moment, so new mobilizations will be needed. Switching the production onto a military path won't be needed. Just start more and we'll win, and win with what we have. Sorry, I can't see that. Just a bit more and we'll win with what we have. This, of course, will not happen, not in the least, because our army is not ready for an offensive. Is that in terms of morale? In terms of everything, simply everything. Starting from ammunition supply, where I won't be going into detail, things aren't doing well. So here's another admission that the ammunition supply is poor for Russia. They are struggling. We've seen peak ammunition ammunition use. Sorry, artillery firing from 60,000 rounds a day, going down to 20,000 and less. And yeah, some of the pro-Russians, people in my threads, are arguing that this is just sheer nonsense. Well, actually, it's confirmed not only by the data but by the claims of many involved, including here Igor Girkin or Strelkov, evil Girkin, starting with ammunition supply, where, and I won't be going into detail, it's not looking good. So communication, communication means are also in the total ass from the point of view of providing them to the forces. Troop command is disgusting due to the absence of communication. Reconnaissance is very weak, no air superiority, just as there wasn't any before. Nothing at all. The enemy is transferring forces near the front line in columns without fearing anything. At best, will not be under shelling if will at best it will go under shelling if scouted by a drone, and our aviation is practically not functioning. Simply unable to reach a front line. It is, of course, used in isolated cases and can even strike something. But in practice, the aviation is unable to establish isolation of the battlefields, isolate the enemy troops and reserves transfer, which is exactly why the battles for Bakhmut and Soledar are running in this sluggish way. If the enemy wants, they bring reinforcements. If they want, they withdraw battered forces to reinforce, to replenish ammo and fuel bit by bit. In essence, this means we're being told that the enemy is taking more casualties than us, but I doubt it. Hugely important. So lots of the pro-Russians saying that, Ukrainians are taking 8-9-1 in terms of Ukrainian to Russian losses. The Ukrainians would say the opposite. But it seems like the Ukrainian claims are somewhat more truthful than the Russians. I cast my doubt from the experience, which I don't have right now, but from theoretical knowledge, not from experience, because he's not on the front line right now. But he was, and he did see similar things, and now he's saying just from theoretical knowledge. The battlefield is not isolated. The enemy is maneuvering reserve, is not counter-attacking, and if it does, then these are local actions. And just to finish off, but ours are always advancing. Meanwhile, advancing means coming out and running to the enemy. And it's not guaranteed they're always battered by artillery, not at all. The enemy also has artillery and is also firing, such as mortars, for which they have plenty of ammo. Therefore, I believe that, unfortunately, to defeat without the new wave of mobilization of not only people, but the rears, we will not be able to defeat Ukraine. If we are not able to defeat it, then the front line will look like it is now, with local operations of clearing districts. Ours could be daft enough to attempt a large offensive, but I'm skeptical it will end with success, to be honest, which is, really pretty damning. And it's better to not even try it. So he's advocating not attacking at all in an offensive, having a rough idea of the state of our forces. I understand that they can defend, but can attack locally in places. But it's better for them not to go on a major offensive, because it can turn out even worse than before the de-escalation. Right. So that's really interesting. When you're now starting to wonder whether these offensives in the Kremina area, in maybe the Vukovar area, are actual offensives, and they look really poor for actual offensives, like they are making some ground, but this isn't like a huge punch through. And then you see what Igor Girkin is saying, and you think, well, maybe they don't have literally the capacity to do that. They don't have the materiel. They've got a bunch of troops, but putting poorly equipped, poorly trained, mobilized troops into there isn't really going to be. It might win you in a slow attritional sense, but it's not going to win you some quick offensive. So perhaps this really is the offensive, and there's not much more the Russians can put in Kremlin. And if that's the case, so I predict Russia will take some land back over the next few weeks in these offensives, but it will be at quite a cost. And the key then is, what will Ukraine do? Will they then have the trained and equipped forces full of a bunch of Western gear, like a whole bunch of Western gear, like literally over 1,000 pieces of stuff, right? Will they then be in a position to say, right, was that what you got? Have you finished now? okay, we'll hit you back. Now, this isn't me being pro-Ukrainian and wanting them to win. Like, this is me trying to interpret what are these like half-assed offensives going on in Vuhledar and up in the Kupiansk Kremlin. Yeah, there is some advancing of the Russians, but it's kind of a little bit, you would expect more if that is a proper offensive. And if it's not a proper offensive, okay, then that might come and that I'd assess differently. But if that is the offensive, then Russians are in as much trouble as Igor Girkin is hinting. So it's you then look at places like Vuhledar, look at these captured people that then saying that so these POWs have said that they were mobilized and that the 155th Guards Naval Infantry Brigade, which is like a crack brigade, or was, but it was decimated in November. It's been decimated. Well, these guys are saying it's been restaffed 3 times due to heavy losses. And all these men that were captured from the 155th were recently mobilized and just before the autumn and are poorly trained. And so actually, if that's one of your better brigades, and that is in real trouble, A, it's been decimated again, and B, it's packed full of mobilized troops with poor training, then things are looking quite bad for the Russians going forward. Damage control from the Russian propaganda. So this is Tetragami looking at around the Vuhledar area saying, well, okay, well, what have they done? So step 1, they failed in an offensive. Step 2 is they claim that the enemy is planning to attack, which is what the Russians are saying. Or we're attacking here because the Ukrainians are planning to attack. Whether or not that is true, I don't know. Step 3, wait a few days. Step 4, claim the enemy offensive failed due to your preemptive strike that thwarted the enemy plans to launch an offensive, which is a way of selling the fact that you've just been banging your head against a brick door, sending wave after wave of attacks that have failed and failed and failed, and trying to sell that approach to your own public. So, and this is taken from a translation of what Khodorkovsky has said about, so a Russian has said about the counterattack in Vuhledar. Okay, moving on. Widely reported in Ukraine last night that Alexei Reznikov is being sacked as a defense minister. He's being replaced by the popular military intel chief Kyrylo Budanov. So Budanov is seems to be pretty decent. Reznikov, I think, has done quite well as a defense minister in certain ways, but he's had to be moved on because of the corruption scandal that arguably didn't fully involve him, but he was apologizing for the fact that they were paying 3 times as much for food procurements in the Ministry of Defense as you can buy in the supermarket. And he was given reasons why that was happening, but someone else was done for corruption under him, and it was on his watch. Was he involved with it? Could have been. I don't have the details, so he could have been, but it didn't look good for him. And I think if Zelensky's going to be strong on corruption, then this is a sort of move he's got to do, which is it might not be strategically useful to take someone with this amount of knowledge and this amount of experience of doing a fairly decent job in the MOD, but we've got to be seen to be clean. So we're going to demote him, put him somewhere else. Here it says Minister for Strategic Industries, a big demotion, replacing Pavel Ryabkin. Yeah, it's got to be done. It's not ideal, but it shows that Zelensky is being serious about corruption. British Ministry of Internal Affairs is preparing to recognise PMK Wagner, so following the Americans, as a terrorist organisation. This will stop quite a few of their money operations. They've got their fingers in a lot of pies in Africa, in the Middle East, and so on. And if they're going to move money around and do this and do that, then recognizing them as officially terrorists would mean they can't do certain financial things using international. This is how I understand it anyway, but correct me if I'm wrong. There is a practical use for recognizing these guys as terrorists. It's not just a kind of PR exercise, although there'll probably be that element to it as well. Okay, so moving on to James Cleverley, who's our foreign secretary in the UK. Our being the UK, I'm British, just in case you didn't realise. I know I'm not drinking tea with my little pinky out, but I assure you I am British. Cleverley, arming Ukraine. Well, shut up, Piss. Arming Ukraine is the fastest and only path to peace. This is something I've been saying, which is how do you stop as many people dying in this war? Give Ukraine as many weapons as possible, and decent weapons and training. Like, it sounds counterintuitive. Why are you giving weapons of war to bring about peace? Well, actually, unless they have a considerable success on the battlefield and fairly quickly, this thing will drag on and more lives will be lost. You need a quick victory or a big explosive victory, and that puts an end, snuffs out the candle, puts an end to this thing. Obviously, there are potential ramifications to that, which is, if that looks like it's going to happen from Putin's point of view, is he more likely to do something pretty mental, like press a red button, that kind of thing? Interesting position here from Zelensky, and I like this. I'm not one that likes to idolize individuals by putting portraits on a wall. He says he's urged officials to abandon the practice of having the photos of the head of state in the office. I once worked for a school. It was a Catholic school, and we had pictures of the Pope up, and I was really uncomfortable because at the time he's being investigated for that particular Pope for being in charge of the office that was complicit in covering up sex abuse scandals. I was like, why do we have a picture of him on the wall? I know it's a Catholic school, but I feel really uncomfortable about that. Yeah, put ideas of abstract, abstract ideas, whether it be for the Americans, things like the Constitution and things like that. But people are grey. They're not. It's not black and white morality. People are complicated, and as soon as you idolize a single human, you're very likely to find out that they've got issues later on. Michael Jackson, Wagner, all of these people that you might think, oh, wonderful, I like this. Oh dear, there's a big problem. You really idolize these people, problems can come about. And actually, it's the wrong kind of idolization. I think you need to idolize the ideas that these people propose. If that's what you like about them, the strength, the courage, standing up to, idolize that kind of thing rather than, the people themselves. And moving on, we have two young women sing Ukraine's national anthem. The only problem is they are in the occupied part of Ukraine, in Russia-controlled Donetsk. Of course, it's so free that they are detained by police, sacked, humiliated, and forced to apologize on video. So here's an interesting thing. Like, if you're pro-Russian, do you think that Russia is the free and liberal society that you would want to live in? Like, there's no alternate media sources. You don't have freedom of speech. I was attacked for kind of, advocating for regulation and censorship. I don't advocate for censorship. I say that censorship is useful in certain situations, and regulation of free speech is what every human being actually advocates for, unless you want pornography on TV at 2 in the afternoon that your granny can see, unless you want, people to be able to come up and shout and swear and use racial invective on anyone at any point in the day, including your children, right? So we regulate. We naturally it's inappropriate to say that. It's inappropriate to say this in this position, in this situation. You can't say that. You can't shout fire in a crowded cinema or theatre. You can't shout bomb in an aircraft. All these kind of things. There are all these situations. So you just draw the line somewhere, right? I'm saying that you have to draw the line somewhere, and we all will disagree on where we draw the line. The thing about the Russians is they appear to draw the line way, way, way down there. So if you're attacking me for being like pro censorship, although that's a straw man of my actual position, right? Hang on, look at your own, government. Look at what Russia's done, right? You can't even use the word war without being punished. Like, you're not allowed to say the word war. Like, so censorship in Russia is insane. There's no freedom of speech compared to what Western nations enjoy, and this is another example of the kind of authoritarian rule that Russia advocates, and I don't like it. So there you go. I'm going to mention Elon Musk again, sorry, but he has again come out. This is a guy that owns Twitter, right? This is real important information space, certainly in the open source intelligence community. And he's come out and amplified an outright Russian propaganda source that is spreading outright like ridiculous disinformation. So this has caused another furore on the internet. The genius in charge of the platform began amplifying clear Russian propaganda. So he thinks that 243 NATO trainers and 2,458 NATO troops have been killed in the war. So he is a tragic loss of life, says Elon Musk, to the claim that 234 NATO military trainers died, US and UK, like literally zero have died. 2,458 NATO soldiers from Germany, Poland, and Lithuania have died. Literally zero have died. 157 Ukrainian soldiers dead. There's no evidence that that's the case. So Russian market, which is an outright like propaganda source, and he's like, yeah, I agree, that's terrible. Whoa, dude, you need to fact check. Like, if you are amplifying this now, loads of your followers are thinking this is terrible, and loads of your followers, like, I've read some of the threads underneath his claim there, and people are asking him to go and, like, why can't you go and be the mediator in peace talks? Holy crap! If he is a mediator, Putin would be walking away with the Crimea and the Donbass without even blinking an eyelid. Just insane. So I'm sorry, my uh, reputation of this guy is going down and down with the sort of things he's saying. He just needs to stop saying stuff. Stop saying stuff on Twitter or anywhere. You know, and that's to do with this. Stick to your expertise. Okay, last thing I'm going to say, which is only maybe not even tangentially connected to Ukraine, but I wonder if there will be any ramifications. Turkey's attention is now going to be turned very much somewhere else. There's been a 7.8 Richter scale earthquake in northern Syria and southern Turkey. It has been pretty devastating. I think now over 600 confirmed dead. There'll be many, many more than that as the days go on. You've got buildings collapsing. You've got medieval castle collapsing. I mean, wow, sad loss to history that is, and culture. But obviously, you've got a huge amount of deaths as well, which is sad loss to human life. Here you've got an airport. This looks like almost the sort of thing you'd see in a movie in like San Andreas or something. Just this line going straight across the runway here. Yeah, classic kind of earthquake visuals there. Anyway, there you go. That's my morning news segment for you. I will try and get you a frontline update. It's going to be a little bit difficult. Got an electrician today, so I might be losing the internet and all that. But do excuse a couple of rants I've thrown in. But there you go. That's me. Toodle Pips, thanks for all your support. Please like, subscribe, and share. And I'll check in with you later.